In today's video, I want to talk about banjos. No, not that kind of banjo. Lathes are relatively simple machines, and banjos are simple as well. And despite that, some wood turners still have issues with their banjos. Some of it's based on maintenance or lack thereof. Some of it's based on the banjo design, and in some instances is how they use the banjo. Today I want to explore those 5 different problems you can run into the banjo, and more importantly, how you can solve those problems. Most banjos have similar features and a very similar design, as shown here by 3 different manufacturers, Powermatic, Laguna, and Jet. Let's go through the parts real quick. I don't have a good description for this part right here, but I'm going to call it the tool rest holder. Actually, some manufacturers call the entire banjo a tool rest holder. This is the locking lever for the tool rest holder. This is the banjo locking lever. And now let's turn it over and look at some other parts. And of course we got the tool rests. Now that we've got them flipped over, we can see they've all got a very similar design. They've got this locking handle. They've got this round object. These are typically called a clamp. You've got this long rod here, and surprisingly enough, they call this the tool support rod. Then they've got a round item. Let me see if I can show you a little close-up. You can just see this clamp bolt that's got an O shape to it that the support rod goes through, so this slides along. The most common problem, number 1, that people have is the banjo not sliding easily on their bedway. There's 3 different solutions to that. First, let's start with the easiest solution. Clean the bedway. You can use something like a low maintenance WD-40 as a bit of a solvent, and clean off any type of finish, little bits of CA glue that might have stuck if you're doing any finishing on the lathe, but clean it off. Clean off the inside surfaces. Clean off, and you may have to remove the banjo to do this, clean off the bottom part of the clamp that's rubbing along the edge here. In addition, you want to clean off the bottom bearing surfaces. If you're going to turn this over, that's a good time to clean the bottom surface, and also make sure your support rod is clean. When you do clean the underside of the banjo, again, get all these bearing surfaces, get up underneath the clamp block real well. Now, the next step up from that is actually, some folks like to put wax. Just a hard finishing wax on the surface. Another wax that some people like to use is a microcrystalline wax. And then other folks like to use a product like Top Coat or Bow Shield T9, which is a rust and corrosion protection. Put a coat on there, let it dry, and then take a rag and just really buff it real well, and that'll solve a lot of your problems. The benefit of the wax is, especially in a humid environment, which I don't have in my shop because my shop is air conditioned and heating, so I'm not worried about humidity. But in shops where you have some high humidity, the wax also does prevent rust. Now, for me, the approach that works best is a tip I got from John Jordan some time back, is just spray a little WD-40 on it, and then just rub it down real well at the beginning of the day. And then that just ensures that everything is just going to slip. First, let me reiterate what you may have heard me say before. One size does not fit all. I've heard from experienced wood turning experts who take opposing views on solving a problem. Some folks say don't use WD-40. It's a water displacement coating and actually contains no lubricant, and it's not sold as such. That said, that I find a light wipe down of WD-40 before I start using one of those green abrasive pads to just kind of clean it clean it up a little bit. Works great for me, but I'm not interested in it being necessarily a lubricant, but it does make this thing slip and slide. As we turn them over, we can see again that the construction remains essentially the same. We have this long eccentric tool support rod that's fastened to the handle. In the larger ones, the handle may fasten on with set screws. On the smaller ones, they all tend to be part of the rod. The large block that we use to come up underneath the bedway to clamp is called a clamp. They tend to be round. Some of them are square. I like the round ones because I think they slide easier. Some folks feel like the square ones give a larger surface, but you know, it is what it is with your particular one. Now, in terms of this, I'm going to have to do a close-up here so you can see this other part that we're going to call a clamp bolt. That's what Powermatic and Laguna call it. So this clamp bolt is essentially a bolt with a O circle that the support rod goes through, and because this is eccentric, when you turn it, it acts as a cam and it pulls this tighter and then snugs it up. So it should be obvious then for some of the issues. We've got the lock nut at the bottom that we can make adjustments to. All three of my banjos have a hex nylon lock nut on it, so once you set it, you can forget it, and it holds in position. So problem number 2, your banjo screeches as you pull it along the tool rest. If the solution for number 1, the waxing and lubricating the lathe bed, didn't eliminate it, the other possibility is that there's a slight raised edge on the end, and you can do a very slight filing. Actually, you want to file it downward on the leading and trailing edges on this side and this side and this side and this side, and I would only do that very lightly. And that's only if it really bothers you, because otherwise it shouldn't really be an issue. Problem number 3 is the banjo fails to tighten, or it feels spongy. So the first thing to do is remove the banjo, bring it bottom side up, and make sure that the support rod is completely clean of any lubricant or grease. This is more likely to be a problem on a brand new lathe where they put some type of preservative on it. So you want to clean that off. You do not want to put any lubricant on this. Then you might take some 320 grit paper and just very lightly smooth it all the way around, so you've got a nice smooth surface. The only points you want to lubricate are going to be the rotating parts where it contacts the banjo itself on either end. And the way I would do that is use a dry lubricant that's not going to gather any dust, and just give it a slight spray. Maybe pull it out just a bit, and then move it around a little bit, and that should take care of that. That's the only lubricant that ought to be on there. Now I can see that I still left a little bit of lubricant here, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that, because this is a brand new lathe, brand new banjo. I thought I'd cleaned it off, but I hadn't. But you want to clean this off to get off any dust or grime. Now at the same time, you want to clean off underneath your clamp, because that's the part that's up against the bottom of the bedway. So you want to clean that off. In addition, you want to clean off the inside of the bedway and the bottom of the bedway where that clamp is going to be rubbing. Now mine is adjusted, so I'm not going to worry about it, but the next step would be to adjust the hex nylon lock nut with an appropriate size wrench, and I would adjust it no more than 1/4 of an inch, and I would adjust it from the middle of the support rod. Don't do it on the end because it's going to flex more in the middle. So that's the part you're going to make your adjustment. So again, if it's a spongy, you might tighten this up no more than a quarter of a turn. Go ahead and slide it back on. The handle straight up, take off slack. And then it should tighten with this thing, you know, no more than halfway down probably. And you just set it so it best works for you. And if it's still spongy, tighten it up another quarter of a turn, take it off, tighten it up another quarter of a turn, and try again until it's right. It should be equal either on the left side or the right side. Either one should tighten it. A very common design is one where you have a lever that tightens, just goes into a threaded area here and presses up against your tool rest and holds it. This tends to work. You find this very common on mini and MIDI lathes because the tool rests tend to be a little shorter. You're doing smaller work. You're not going out as far on a long tool rest where you're going to leverage the thing. So that might be a perfectly functional design for you. It was a problem on my old Powermatic 3520B Mustard Monster. It's a great lathe, but the tool rest had a rather poor locking solution, especially when you're using a long 14-inch tool rest where you can get a lot of leverage out here if it's not tight. So they improved this on the new Powermatic C model, and they've come up with a design that's very similar to what you'll find on other high-end large lathes such as One Way and Robust. It uses a cam type of clamping action that as you tighten this actually pulls these things in and clamps around the tool post, and this is a very effective solution. And the Powermatic is the parent company of Powermatic and Jet have gone to this kind of solution on just about all of their lathes now. The other design, one used by Laguna, is a clamping action, and it clamps on the outside as shown here. And this works fine as long as you're using a tool rest that fits exactly according to these dimensions, such as the one that comes with your lathe. But once you start dealing with aftermarket third-party ones, sometimes there's some slight variation of a few thousandths of an inch in the spec that may tend to cause you some problems with this action working. One easy fix for the larger Laguna lathes comes from Bernie Richard, who shared this solution as shown here on the Laguna Lathe Owners group on Facebook. You simply add a washer to give you a tighter surface against a rough or not a completely flat surface on the Laguna tool rest for the larger lathes. Another solution for fine-tuning the larger Laguna Banjo tool rest clamping is shown in this video link that I'm showing here, where the Banjo has two different holes, and you make that adjustment by putting another bolt on that bottom hole. So click on that link here if you've got that issue with Laguna, and I'll also have that link in the show notes. If you don't like your banjo design, you've got three alternatives. Number one, learn to live with it. Life's not perfect. Few tools are perfect. Sometimes you can learn to live with it. The second tip comes from fellow club member Tim Robertson, who says that these three banjos all have what they call an offset or a dog leg. Some people don't like that because in some particular turning operations it gets in their way. And what Tim points out is that frequently you can just turn your banjo around in the other direction and eliminate that dog leg, and that may solve your problem. The third solution is buy a replacement from Robust or One Way. Both provide a very, very strong clamping action similar to this Powermatic. And from what I've seen, One Way seems to sell a lot of replacement banjos to fit other lathes of various sizes. And
if you call one way, they'll tell you which one you need, and they can actually grind the clamp that will fit your particular model lathe that you might be buying that replacement for. And for bonus problem solving, in many instances you've got this ratchet style ratchet lever it's spring loaded. You pull it out, you can adjust it to get this out of the way. If you're too forceful with these things on your lathe, you can strip these things out. So I've got a video, if you're interested, look at the video link here on that separate video on replacing these ratchet lever, easy for you to say, replacing these ratchet lever knobs on a lathe. So I hope this information I provide you on the banjos will help solve any problems you've got now or possibly in the future. For other lathe maintenance tips, you might want to click on the full playlist I have on lathe maintenance. Y'all stay safe. Come on back here.